This week, the Supreme Court faced a simple question. Do pregnant women in Idaho facing serious health complications deserve emergency stabilizing care? Instead of providing an answer, the court's majority punted the case back to the district court ruling that it had reached the bench prematurely. Now, the dismissal leaves in effect the district court's injunction against Idaho's near-total abortion ban, temporarily allowing pregnant women in the state to access emergency care. By upholding the injunction, the court appeared to address the issue, permitting Idaho doctors to perform emergency abortions. In reality, the court did nothing to address the merits of a case having an impact on more than 24 states with similar draconian bans. The decision to dismiss the case leaves the national abortion landscape unsettled as medical professionals across the country struggle to make sense of which pregnancy complications they can legally treat under the narrow medical exceptions provided in their state's abortion bans. At the heart of the case is whether EMTALA, a federal law requiring hospitals to provide emergency care, preempts Idaho's near-total abortion ban. Before the district court's injunction, pregnant women facing dangerous health conditions like preeclampsia or ectopic pregnancies were being airlifted to other states instead of receiving immediate treatment in Idaho. Dr. James P. Souza, a chief physician at an Idaho hospital, describes how Idaho's abortion ban forces doctors to confront a series of agonizing questions when treating patients. Quote, is she sick enough? Is she bleeding enough? Is she septic enough for me to do this abortion and not risk going to jail and losing my license? When the guessing game gets too uncomfortable, we transfer the patients out at a very high cost to another state where the doctors are allowed to practice medicine, end quote. This is the harsh reality we're living under post-Dobbs. On the surface, the Supreme Court's decision to uphold the injunction allowing emergency abortions seems like a major win for abortion rights. In reality, critics believe that the court is avoiding a ruling because they recognize that an unpopular decision could influence the upcoming election, much like Dobbs did in the lead-up to the 2022 midterms. Much like the Mifepristone case, the court likely punted this case back to a district court to stretch out the litigation, allowing it to continue for another year or two. Critics believe that Justices Barrett, Kavanaugh, and Roberts, often referred to as the middle three, are banking on a potential Trump win that could lead to reinterpretations of the EMTALA statute. Meanwhile, the court's liberal justices, Kagan and Sotomayor, likely agreed to dismiss the case in exchange for maintaining Idaho's injunction. In a scathing dissent, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson calls out her colleagues, accusing them of delaying a decision as an act of, quote, political chicanery before the election, end quote. Reading her dissent from the bench, which is a move typically reserved for when justices feel strongly about an issue, Jackson goes on to accuse the majority of endangering lives, stating, quote, will this court just have a do-over, rehearing and rehashing the same arguments we're considering now, just at a comparatively more convenient point in time? Or maybe we will keep punting on this issue altogether, facilitating the suffering of people in need of urgent medical treatment. The court's dismissal comes on the heels of a recent Johns Hopkins study showing a spike in infant deaths in Texas. The study is the latest research showing higher infant mortality rates in states with draconian abortion restrictions. Between March and December of 2022, Texas witnessed a 13% increase in infant deaths following the passing of its near-total abortion ban. Birth defects increased by 23%. And that's compared to a 3% decrease in the rest of the United States. For a movement that brands itself pro-life, the so-called pro-life movement is noticeably silent on these actual deaths. Meanwhile, the conservative Fifth Circuit earlier this year ruled that EMTALA did not preempt Texas's strict abortion ban. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court will eventually have to make a decision on this question. And while patients in Idaho are, at least for now, protected by the injunction, millions of others now face deep uncertainty unleashed by the Supreme Court's decision to delay. I'm joined by Michelle Goodwin, a professor of constitutional law and global health policy at Georgetown Law. She's the award-winning author of Policing the Womb, Invisible Women and the Criminalization of Motherhood. Michelle, there's some really important legal stuff here, but I actually want to skip to the statistical things that I mentioned in the introduction, the increase in birth defects and the increase in infant deaths as a result of the passing of the law banning abortion without an exception, or generally without exception, in Texas. This is a real outcome. This is a real outcome of what happens when you ban abortion. You have often pointed out that maternal mortality rates and infant mortality rates in America are far higher than they should be in a fully developed nation in the richest country in the world. And we are seeing the actual statistical results of the passage of these laws since the fall of Roe.
Right. So it's not just we are the most dangerous place in all of the industrialized world to be pregnant or for infants to be born. We rank 55th in the world in terms of maternal mortality. Maternal morbidity is also something that's important to pay attention to, meaning that a woman might survive after the pregnancy, but for the rest of her life be in a chronic condition. And we knew this even before the Dobbs decision, as Texas had begun work to shut down abortion clinics. In the wake of all of that, what we saw, more women becoming pregnant, more maternal mortality in that state. We know that this exists because many of the places that provided abortion care were places that provided prenatal care, postnatal care, contraceptive access, all of those things. And when those clinics closed, that meant that fundamental health care for women in those regions was then suddenly gone. And we're a country that does not have universal health care, which means that for poor women, working class women, they really relied on those health care clinics. Keep in mind that in the states that have now shuttered abortion clinics, have imposed these abortion bans, they've not set up new hospitals. They've not set up new clinics. They have left these women to suffer without any access to more health care.
In a couple of minutes, I'm going to be talking to Jeff Rosen, the president and CEO of the National Constitution Center, who always reminds me when there's a Supreme Court opinion to read concurrences and dissenting opinions. Justice Amy Coney Barrett's concurrence introduced a new and somewhat alarming theory concerning EMTALA. Can you give me a sense of her argument, what the strategy might be in advancing her theory?
Well, the strategy that we see between the mifepristone case and as well as the EMTALA case have been these concerns about people who have religious views, and these religious views that may end up allowing them to circumvent what would be federal protections and protections that would keep individuals alive. One thing that I want to make sure that we surface before we go is that the point of EMTALA was to protect individuals who were poor or in an emergency situation where we're not at home and we need care. Mind that this was the same kind of theory that we needed during the civil rights movement, when African Americans literally died on the steps of hospitals not being cared for. What EMTALA does is it protects not only pregnant women, it protects anybody who needs emergency health care. We have seen what it's like in this country when people of color have been turned away, when poor people have been turned away, when people who have immigrant status have been turned away. And that's part of the danger in this. All Americans could be deeply concerned with the Supreme Court trying to slice and dice within this space, because those protections protected us all. And once you begin cutting away, who will be the next group of people that will not be able to get service?
Right. And we actually have real stories about doctors who are saying, you're not sick enough, you're not bleeding enough, you're not septic enough.
That's right.
I'm not going to risk my license on this. Michelle, good to see you as always. Thank you. Michelle Goodwin is a professor of constitutional law and global health policy at Georgetown Law. She's the host of the On the Issues podcast with Michelle Goodwin, author of a book, Policing the Womb, Invisible Women and the Criminalization of Motherhood.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.